what shall I say, keep enthusing for the French Revolution no matter what. And he makes remarks in writing that are quite extraordinary to read. He says that rather than see the French Revolution defeated, he would have the whole earth depopulated. So there was...
You go back to Adam and Eve.
Only one Adam and Eve. If that's what it took, he'd rather that than see the ideas of 1789 defeated. He really meant it too, I think. What he didn't realize was how opportunist the Bonapartists were going to be, or the Jacobins. When they sent this envoy, Citizen Genet, to the United States, the embarrassment was extraordinary, because this man thought that he had permission to say anything he liked. He said he would come not as an envoy, but as someone to speak directly to the American people over the head of the president, which as soon as Washington heard that, it was all over. He said, "Who is this Popinjay?"
There's that word again. I wonder if anyone recognizes. Then take the other with the British. In fact, there was a whole screed against King George III that was left out that Jefferson wrote, and had a grudge. I mean, that's really the right word to call it. A diplomat comes by the name of Mary, and he's treated in a peremptory way, and Jefferson gets his revenge. Well,
yes, there was something personal in it, in that Jefferson wrote the last remonstrance of the colonists to King George before the Declaration. Your Majesty, this is your last chance, which he wrote in a rather high-handed manner. It's very good. It's I think quite polite, but for the king to read it, I think he thought, who on earth is this Virginian?
Who is this Popinjay?
Upstart Popinjay, to be telling me I've only got one more chance. I mean, and I don't think it was ever forgiven. The king may not have known that Jefferson was the author of the Declaration. A lot of people, by the way, including in America, didn't know that till quite late. But he did know who he was when he came with Adams to London. They were going to divide the embassies in Paris and London between them. Both went to a reception where the king was and turned his back very rudely on Jefferson and behaved in a swinish Hanoverian manner. We're still stuck with this swinish Hanoverian monarchy on the other side of the water, by the way. Now, Jefferson never... it's part of his not being so funny... It's part of his being ruthless, is he never forgot a slight, and he would wait years to vindicate one. So the next chance he got, when the king had to send an embassy to him in Washington, the poor Anthony Merry and his wife were snubbed in every way Jefferson could think up.
I'm going to give out the phone number. We're talking about Thomas Jefferson. We welcome your calls. If you'd like to join us with this conversation, feel free to do so now. Toll free, 866-733-6786. That's the number to call. Wherever you're listening to us, or however, on the radio, on the internet, or on the Sirius satellite, you can join us right now, toll free, 866-733-6786. Or email us. Your emails, of course, are welcome. Forum@kqed.org, talking with Christopher Hitchens, his book, Thomas Jefferson, Author of America. I'm Michael Krasny. This is Forum. I'm Michael Krasny, spending the hour with Christopher Hitchens. Always a pleasure. His new book, Thomas Jefferson, Author of America, and he'll be at City Arts and Lectures tomorrow at the Herbst Theater, 8 o'clock on stage, talking with our own Scott Schaefer, and we're going to talk with our own listeners and go, first of all, to Ken. Morning, Ken.
Hi. It's a pleasure, and thanks for taking my call. I had a question about the whole slavery. I had read in the People's History of the United States that slavery was originally not legal in the territory of the United States, but they had such a hard time getting people to move over here because the lifestyle was so brutal, and they turned to it in desperation to get the land cleared, and then it became such a part of our country that even all the way up to Lincoln, he didn't emancipate the slaves till it was politically expedient, and I just wanted to see what you had to say about that and how Jefferson fit into that. I mean, I know they knew it was bad, that it was wrong, slavery was wrong, even to the point where Abigail Adams really wrote into a letter I was reading, that John Adams' book, that the fever that they were having in the summer or winter of 77, it was punishment from God for slavery. I mean, they evidently knew it was a very wrong thing. And I was just wondering how Jefferson fit into that from the very beginning to the end. What kind of link was he?
Well, the slavery question comes up very acutely in his day, having, as you say, become much more tenacious and much more profitable since the Jamestown foundings in Virginia. And it comes up because they have to make a Declaration of Independence, and they feel they have to explain themselves to the world. That's why what's called in the Declaration a decent respect to the opinions of mankind. makes it such an intriguing document. And so they can't exactly leave the question aside, or at least at first they think they can't, because Jefferson, who's appointed to be the draftsman, has a long section, which is in my book, saying why slavery should be abolished and blaming it on the king for inflicting it on the United States. So this is struck out. Jefferson never got over it. It was struck out of the Declaration partly by the influence of the delegates from Georgia and the Carolinas, but also partly by the northern delegates who, if they weren't owning slaves, were still profiting by the trade, as was, of course, Jefferson himself. So it starts with what some people call the original sin of the United States. It's certainly the original insuperable contradiction. And then when, at the convention in Philadelphia, they don't want to use the word slave in the Constitution. They still feel queasy about it. So certain kinds of worker are described as having only 3/5 of a vote. In other words, only 3/5 the value of a human being. They get over it like that. Jefferson isn't at Philadelphia. He's in Paris at this point. But let me see the second part of your question. Well, even Mr. Lincoln, of course, only abolished slavery or issued the Emancipation Proclamation, at any rate, in the border states. He did it as a war-winning measure to try and subvert the economy of the Confederacy. But he
also wanted to send slaves to Liberia, too.
He also was in favor of expatriating slaves. I mean, I suppose that's the best way of expressing this to you. There were many, many people. Thomas Paine was one of them. Benjamin Rush was another. Benjamin Franklin was another, who thought that it was a moral wrong and an evil and should be abolished right away. No one interested in building up the United States, however, could ever imagine quite that the right time had come to get rid of all this very valuable property. A terrible moment occurs, I think, when the Louisiana Purchase comes, and Paine says to Jefferson, look, here we have a great chance. Don't let any slaves into the new territories. Let's start again. As the country expands, it's not going to take slavery with it. Let's get some hard-working German Protestant settlers and put them into Louisiana and make it flourish that way. But Jefferson is in such a hurry to get the profit from Louisiana's sugar, and so afraid that if slavery is abolished, it'll give an advantage to other powers in the Caribbean, that he doesn't do it. And there's a terrible quarrel between him and Paine and others, and it means that there's going to be a civil war, because it means that as the country expands, so will slaveholding states expand until they get to be roughly equal, which means there will have to be a fight. So there's a tragic element running through every bit of Jefferson's life. It comes up at every juncture.
Let me thank Ken. And also, since you mentioned trying to move quickly on the Louisiana Purchase and buy it from Napoleon, that included, I think your word, short-circuiting Congress and the Constitution.
Oh, when Jefferson wanted to get around the Constitution, there was no one like him for it. I mean, for example, he decided that with the sending of the Navy to put down the slave trade in North Africa, that he didn't need the permission of Congress, who were in any case in recess. Why bother them? He didn't tell them till the fleet was so far over the horizon that it couldn't be recalled. With the Louisiana Purchase, he had to, in fact, raise a private budget, very unconstitutional, to give to his people in Paris, his negotiators, say, this is how much you're authorized to offer to buy this extraordinary acreage. And with the Lewis and Clark expedition, he didn't tell Congress what he wanted either. He basically said these are just people going out to look at birds and bees and rocks and trees and so forth. He didn't say what they were mapping. No, he was very feline when it came to anything like that. But the defense of it would be, I suppose, that he wasn't profiting from it himself. He felt that he was acting as the steward of a future great power. And of all these fait accomplis, of course, he finally got everyone to agree.
Doug, join us. You're on the air. Good morning.
Oh, hello, Michael. Thank you
Hi.
for taking my call. It's a pleasure to meet you again, Mr. Hitchens. You probably don't recall, but I once served you a very nice bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon when you stayed at the Mark Hopkins Intercontinental. I was in the room service department.
That was very nice of you. Was it only one bottle?
Yes, it was only one bottle. And in fact, actually, later on, I went down to the dining room, and you saw me, beckoned me to your table, and were kind enough to introduce me to Jerry Brown.
I do remember.
Oh, well, thank you.
Who, by the way, is getting married. You know.
Yes, we have to congratulate.
Well, good for the governor.
And congratulations, felicitations to Miss Ann Gust as well. I think it's Jerry who should be congratulated.
Thank you. My question, sir, is that I heard you speaking on the subject of Jefferson on Talk